In the morning of 1975, a man clad in saffron insisted the Deputy High Commissioner of India to United Kingdom to arrange a meeting with the leader of opposition in the British House of Commons. And the Deputy High Commissioner skeptically arranges the meeting, with a slight apprehension of embarrassment coming his way because of the saffron-clad sadhu, who did not know a word of English but was blazing high with confidence. As the meeting started, the Deputy High Commissioner introduced the sadhu to the leader of opposition. That leader of opposition was none other than Britain's second most famous and greatest Prime Minister, Margaret Thatcher, who was the leader of opposition back then, but after a couple of years went on to rule Britain for 10 years and earned herself the title of the Iron Lady. And the Deputy High Commissioner was none other than Natwar Singh, who later went on to become the Foreign Minister in Dr. Manmohan Singh's cabinet. And that saffron-clad sadhu in his 20s was none other than Chandraswami, the most famous power broker, power builder, and perhaps the silent wazir of Indian political game of chess from 1980 to 1996. And everything changed for Margaret Thatcher after that meeting. She became witness to his prophecies about her becoming Prime Minister of Britain in future. When I ask you about what is the most significant thing that India exports to the world, your answer might contain references to India's spice trade, or India's business outsourcing from Bangalore, or petroleum products, or gems and jewelry exports. But what if I were to tell you that none of it is as significant as one very different and highly ignored component? When people started pouring into India as a tourist in 1970s, what do you think they were coming to India for? Taj Mahal? Qutub Minar? Well, no. They were the hippies from United States and Europe who had all what a person could possibly possess, but they were spiritually bankrupt and insignificant. So, in that quest to gain spiritual consciousness, they traveled to a poverty-struck country. And yes, that's the component I was talking about. Spirituality was and is the most significant component of India's export to the world, and this is highly ignored and underestimated. What do you think why ISKCON movement thrived in Europe and America? How come Osho became so powerful and big that even FBI and the American Homeland Security Department got worried on his impact on the American youth? How come one of the world's biggest tech giants, Apple's CEO Steve Jobs, had to travel to India to a holy man named Neem Karoli Baba? How come world's most famous rock band Beatles kneeled before a sadhu? How come George Harrison gave up all he had and joined ISKCON? How come Jaddu Krishnamurti became the guru of the billionaires? How come Sadhguru and Sri Sri Ravi Shankar have a huge mass following in the West? And why and how come Britain's most powerful Prime Minister, Margaret Thatcher, gave a private audience to perhaps the most famous political influencer of India in 1980s, Chandraswami? Margaret Thatcher, who was the leader of the opposition in the British House of Commons, was so impressed with N. Chandraswami that she went on to do whatever Chandraswami guided her to do. And I'm deliberately using the word guide her. She in fact started to wear red clothes on Tuesdays. Chandraswami told Margaret Thatcher of future word by word, and that left a deep impact on Margaret Thatcher. And guys, today's topic is not about India's spiritual enlightenment, but the most notorious and famous and perhaps the most powerful power broker of Indian politics from 1980 to 1996. No Prime Minister from Indira Gandhi to Rajiv Gandhi, from VP Singh to Narasimha Rao, had the guts to stand up to him and tell him to shut the fuck off. When Prime Minister Indira Gandhi got thrown out of power in 1977 by the masses for the imposition of emergency, she was quite broken. And then she started to do a bit of communal politics. She started to visit temples, started seeking spiritual guidance, and in that quest she came across a sadhu, later came to be known as Chandraswami, who is often credited for bringing her back to power in 1980. Chandraswami was a tantric. He belonged to the Behrod city of Rajasthan. Having been born into a Jain family, the interest grew more into tantric studies. and he learned all that he could learn about Tantrism and started showcasing his talent to political masters in New Delhi. And that became the turning point of his life. He came directly in contact with the power builders of India. Most recent depiction of N. Chandraswami is in a web series named Scam 1992 on Harshad Mehta. And yes, that's the Chandraswami for you. The self-proclaimed faith healer and preacher, Chandraswami was said to have been Narasimha Rao's spiritual advisor soon after Narasimha Rao became Prime Minister. In 1991, Chandraswami built an ashram in Qutub Industrial Area, one of the premier locations in New Delhi. The land for the ashram was stated to have been allotted by Indira Gandhi herself. Chandraswami, whose real name was Nemichand Jain, is said to have dispensed spiritual advice to Sultan of Brunei, Sheikh Isa bin Salman Al Khalifa of Bahrain, actress Elizabeth Taylor, who famously portrayed the role of Cleopatra in the movie Cleopatra, British Premier Margaret Thatcher, and arms dealer Adnan Khashoggi, among other famous figures. He also counted some head of state and government as his close friends. The same Chandraswami was made accused for having financed the assassination of Rajiv Gandhi and was arrested on multiple counts for violation of Foreign Exchange Regulation Act and fraud, but nothing could keep him from being held as the most famous political influencer of New Delhi. Surprisingly, when Chandraswami died in 2014, his cremation was a low-key affair. Hardly any party member visited his cremation. And being a youth, we do not pay much heed to his name anymore. But to a person born in 1970s, this name is of particular interest. And this name rings 1,000 bells. Chandraswami cannot be compared to any other political personality these days. He was the most powerful power broker in New Delhi. He was close to prime ministers, not some low-key minister. Chandraswami was the Wazir of the chess, not some pyada.